If someone would have told me before this season started, and especially a couple of weeks before this season started, that Russell Westbrook was going to be arguably the Kings' best player through 8 games, I would not have believed them. And yet here we are. Russell Westbrook has been absolutely amazing for the Kings, and he does it again. He gets a triple-double. He goes for 23, 16 rebounds, and 10 assists to lead the shorthanded Kings to a win against the also shorthanded Golden State Warriors in a game where both teams were missing their top players. The Kings missing arguably their top two offensive players in Sabonis and Levine, plus their top defensive player in Keegan Murray. The Warriors missing their top three guys in Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond Green. And yet this was a banger. This game, as a Kings fan, was everything that I could have hoped for. And what I mean by that is Russell Westbrook going off, Malik Monk returning from his absence and having 21 points, and then your two rookies in Nique, Clifford, and Maxime Raynaud playing well. I've stated before that, this Kings season for me in general is not the most exciting that it's ever been, and I'm not the most excited going into every single game, but there are certain things that I do get very excited about for this season. And those things are watching a player like Russell Westbrook do what he did and the energy that he provides the team, going off in front of the Golden One setter, getting extremely hyped. Malik Monk, the same thing, right? Both Russell Westbrook and Malik Monk are just those energy players that are fan favorites that everyone loves to watch. And so for me, this season is about watching those guys and having fun watching those guys do what they do. And then watching the young guys, watching the rookies, and both Nique, Clifford, and Maxime Raynaud, I thought had their best games of the season. Plus beating the Warriors in a comeback game that then was close in the end. Went back and forth. The Warriors had a pretty big lead. Then the Kings come back. They get a pretty big lead. Then it gets very close in the end. And the Kings are able to pull out the win at home in very exciting fashion. Like, it doesn't get much better than that. I felt like the team and the players that the Kings put out there today were just guys that are very easy to root for. And I would love if we could just play those guys all season long. Nique Clifford playing 33 minutes. You had Maxime Raynaud coming off the bench playing 15 minutes, getting his first extended look in the NBA. But this game didn't exactly start out all that great. The first quarter was not good for the Kings, and they looked extremely just disconnected as a team on both the offensive and defensive end, especially on defense. They were getting picked apart. And on the offensive end, it just seemed like nobody was really stepping up to take that offensive load that you're missing when Zach LaVine and Domantas Sabonis are both out. No one was stepping up to take on that offensive load. The Kings ran out a starting lineup of Dennis Schroeder, Russell Westbrook, DeMar DeRozan, Nique Clifford, and Drew Eubanks. The Warriors were starting a lineup of Will Richard, Brandon Podziemski, Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, and Quentin Post. Both teams were daring each other to shoot threes early on, and that worked out really well for the Warriors and didn't work out so well for the Kings. For the Warriors, Will Richard had a great game. So did Buddy Hield. Jonathan Kuminga started this game out hot, especially as a jump shooter. On defense, it felt like the Kings were just not awake enough or connected enough on the defensive end. And it was especially Dennis Schroeder was not great defensively. Russell Westbrook was doing a lot of ball watching. And Malik Monk off the bench was not having a great defensive game. Everyone felt like those three guys especially were getting back cut a lot and weren't really getting over screens. And that was allowing the Warriors to have a pretty nice time offensively. The Warriors scored 32 points in that first quarter. It was 32-25 after the first quarter. Transition defense was a problem, and it just felt like the Kings were not up for this game in the first quarter, which was pretty disappointing because I didn't necessarily expect it to look all that great offensively, which it didn't. But I was expecting a little more effort on the defensive end to start this game out. On the offensive end, it was a lot on DeMar DeRozan to be the guy to create in that first quarter, and he had a couple of nice moments, a couple of scores. He had 4 points in that first quarter, but the spacing around him wasn't very good, and he wasn't having his best shooting game. He also couldn't get a foul call. That was the main problem for DeMar in that first quarter and in the first half in general, and that would absolutely change in the third quarter. But he could not get to the free throw line, and that was his biggest problem. And you could tell the Kings were really looking at him to shoulder the offensive load, and he was not really up for it in that first quarter. Westbrook and Schroeder, obviously you're looking to those two guys as well in that starting lineup. and they both had a couple of nice moments of getting to the rim, some nice finishes, but nobody was having an outstanding scoring game or offensive game in that first quarter. Schroeder got into foul trouble pretty early on, so that took him out of the game. And it really was the bench to come into this game and stay attached to the Warriors. They didn't necessarily make up a ton of ground, but they stayed attached, kept the Kings close enough, because at times in that first half, it did feel like things were getting away from the Kings, especially the way that the Warriors were running in transition. They were getting a lot of open threes, both in transition and because the Kings were not fighting over screens. Like I said before, Will Richard was hot from three, Buddy Hield was hot from three, so it had to be the bench to come in and give that effort. And the two guys that really did it were Malik Monk and Maxime Raynaud. Malik Monk didn't have a great defensive game, but on the offensive end, he came in and he provided a little bit of a spark. It wasn't perfect for him, but he knocked down a couple of threes. He got to the rim a couple of times. There were some turnovers in there that weren't great in his return after he was out for personal reasons in the last couple of games, but he provided some much needed shooting to this Kings team. And then you had Maxime Raynaud coming in, getting an offensive rebound and finishing a pretty tough finish, I will say. He's had some easier looks in his NBA career that he's missed, but he got that one to go, and those were his first NBA points. And then after that, he got to the free throw line, knocked those down. The free throw shot was looking smooth. And he was also competing on the defensive end. Towards the end of that first quarter, we got the Kings debut of Precious Achuiwa, and he was playing primarily the four, or really only the four. I thought we might see him at the five in this game because Sabonis was out, but they had him out there playing alongside Drew Eubanks. And the lineup of Devin Carter, Dennis Schroeder, Nique Clifford, Precious Achuiwa, and Drew Eubanks, that was absolutely awful for the spacing of the team, but I did like how Precious was cutting to the rim, trying to make things happen on the offensive glass as well. He got his first bucket when Dennis Schroeder drove to the rim, and Precious made a nice cut to the basket. Schroeder found him for the layup. And so it was interesting that they were starting Achuiwa on the perimeter, but he was making some nice cuts to the interior to get himself involved. In the second quarter, pretty early on in that second quarter, we saw a lineup of Malik Monk, Russell Westbrook, Dennis Schroeder, Keon Ellis, and Drew Eubanks. So an extremely small lineup with truly just four guards out there plus Drew Eubanks. And unsurprisingly, that lineup got absolutely dominated on the offensive glass. Turnovers were also a problem, leading to some fast break opportunities for the Warriors, but it was the offensive rebounding against that group that was causing a lot of issues for the Kings. What kept the Kings in the game offensively, though, was Russell Westbrook and his playmaking. Westbrook was pushing the pace very well, finding Malik Monk up the floor, driving in transition and getting an offensive, or a goaltending call, getting into the paint and finding Drew Eubanks. Drew Eubanks had 8 points pretty early on in this game, was 3 for 3 from the field, and a lot of that was set up by Westbrook. Westbrook was also able to hit a three, but I really just love when Westbrook has the ball. You can see how he uses his pace of play so well. He's so patient, and he's reading the defense and using deception, and he doesn't commit to anything too early on. He's always reading the defense and just using his change of pace to manipulate the defense. And he has some great moments, like the one where he just drove to the rim and hesitated, then drove again, got Quentin Post to commit to him and just dropped off a nice little pass to Eubanks for a dunk. It must be a dream for a big man who can just dunk the ball to play with Russell Westbrook, because he just generates so many open looks for his big men. And so while it felt like the Warriors were getting things pretty easily in transition and on these back cuts, the Kings were staying in the game because of Russell Westbrook, but also because of Maxime Raynaud and Nique Clifford. Both of those guys had very good first halves. And I thought Maxime Raynaud had kind of a perfect first half, which is wild because every other time he'd been put into an NBA game so far, he'd looked really bad. I don't think he's had good minutes prior to this game. And then he comes in this first half, and I don't even remember him making a single mistake. It felt like he was constantly making good plays, especially guarding out on the perimeter, which was the biggest surprise to me. He was able to guard guards out on the perimeter like a Moses Moody and prevent them from getting three-point shots off, but then also stay in front of them and stop them from getting to the rim. And he did it on one possession, the Warriors were pushing in transition, and transition offense, like I said, had been big for the Warriors. The Kings' transition defense was not good. And Raynaud got out to Moses Moody to stop him from shooting the three, then stopped the drive from Moody, got them into the half-court offense. Then later in that possession, the ball gets back to Moody. Raynaud stays in front again and stops him. So I was super impressed by Raynaud's defense and lateral movement to stay in front of these guards on the perimeter. He was contesting shots well around the rim, and then on the offensive end, he got inside on the offensive glass and forced Jonathan Kuminga to foul him. Set a great screen for Malik Monk to free up Monk for an easy layup at the rim. He was just doing so many things well. And then Nique Clifford hit a couple of threes, hit a really nice sidestep three, hit one where he drifted out to the wing and Westbrook found him. And the game started to get pretty chaotic towards the end of that second quarter. It was really fast-paced, but there were turnovers on both sides. Keon Ellis made quite a few great transition defense plays that stopped the Warriors from really getting any momentum. And he, in fact, generated momentum for the Kings by getting a steal, leading to a Russell Westbrook transition three. And somehow the Kings got within 5 by the end of this first half. The Kings battled back, had a good end to the first half. And so despite a pretty quiet game from DeMar DeRozan, a pretty quiet game from Dennis Schroeder, it was Russell Westbrook, Malik Monk, Maxime Raynaud, and Nique Clifford that were carrying this Kings team. Jonathan Kuminga had a pretty good first half, battling against mismatches. He was drawing fouls. He was always going to be a pretty tough player for the Kings to defend, especially when his jumper was going down early on. And the Warriors were just getting good performances from quite a few of their role players stepping up in the absence of their top dogs, obviously. And it felt like a game that could have gotten away maybe early in that second quarter, but the Kings were able to keep it close. And I think that's kind of been a trend of this season where there have been a lot of moments where the other team gets it into the double-digit lead, but then the Kings just never let them pull away and are always making a game of it. And they did that all without DeMar DeRozan really doing anything. And I thought DeMar DeRozan was going to have to be the key offensive player in this game. And so we just needed more out of him in the second half, and it felt like this game was well within reach. And right away, to start that second half, DeMar DeRozan got to the free throw line, got 2 free throws. He only had 1 free throw in the entire first half, and I think it was from an and one in transition. And he just started getting to the line quite a lot. Drew Eubanks was also getting after it on the glass. I think he drew a foul or two. The Kings just started drawing a lot of fouls. Russell Westbrook drew the 4th team foul on the Warriors with 9 minutes and 22 seconds left in the third quarter. So for the rest of that quarter, the rest of the 9:22 left, the Kings were going to go to the free throw line at every foul. And that was huge. That was the story of that third quarter, because I don't think there was any point in this game where the Kings' half-court offense looked all that great. The spacing was never really there. It was a lot of relying on certain guys like a DeMar DeRozan to make a play, or a Dennis Schroeder to beat his guy off the dribble, or Russell Westbrook to really create something out of nothing. They were relying a lot on individuals. The team play offensively at no point in this game looked very good. And they were also relying on fast break points. The Kings scored 30 points off of turnovers, off of the Warriors' 19 turnovers. So that was a huge part of their offense. And then going 14 for 18 from the free throw line in that third quarter. They just continuously attacked the rim and also attacked the offensive glass to draw fouls as well. It felt like they drew a lot of fouls on loose balls going after rebounds. Even on the defensive end, Drew Eubanks drew a foul on the defensive end going after a rebound. And because they're in the bonus for the entire quarter pretty much, he just gets to walk down to the other end and shoot some free throws. So that was the main reason that the Kings were able to have so much success in that third quarter, scoring 35 points to the Warriors' 23. You also had some great challenges from Doug Christie. He's what is he, like 7-1 or 8-1 on the season in challenges now? And both of them were pretty much identical. Nique Clifford got called for a charge in transition, challenged successfully, changed to a block. And then same thing with, I think it was Dennis Schroeder going to the rim, or maybe it was someone else. It might have been Schroeder though. Again, a charge call, changed to a block call. So Doug Christie has been on it with his challenges. And so obviously the offense turned up in that third quarter because they scored 35 points. But a lot of it was down to their defense. In the first half, their defense was just not awake. They were getting back cut so much. They were allowing these points in transition. And in that third quarter, that went away. They were not getting back cut the same as they were in that first half. They were a lot more locked in defensively. They were absolutely getting after it, forcing a ton of turnovers, and that was what was spurring their offense on. And I thought both Drew Eubanks and Maxime Raynaud were doing a really good job of defending the perimeter. Of course, right after I thought that, then the fourth quarter happened where Drew Eubanks was absolutely awful guarding on the perimeter, but we'll get to that. The Warriors a couple of times just trying to play at a fast pace, and because of some Kings pressure, just threw the ball away. Westbrook was doing a great job of keeping the pace high, constantly trying to push the pace, and that's exactly what this team needs. Malik Monk really got it going towards the end of that third quarter. He started driving into the lane and getting to the free throw line as well. And I just loved how the Kings were relentlessly attacking because they don't have the greatest three-point shooters, but they didn't fall in love with the three at any point. In fact, the Warriors were taking double the Kings' threes. It ended up being 43 three-point attempts for the Warriors to 23 for the Kings. The Kings going 11 for 23 and the Warriors going 17 for 43. So the Kings shooting a great percentage from three, but they never fell in love with it. And the energy was just so high in that third quarter. And especially towards the end of that third quarter, there was a string of possessions where everything was going well for the Kings. Nique Clifford threw it up to Precious in transition, and Precious had to come down with it, but then finished. Then the Warriors just pretty much threw the ball away, turned it over. Malik Monk got to the free throw line, and it just felt like everyone on the court for the Kings was just really into the game. They reduced the Warriors' offense to late shot clock threes, Al Horford chucking up threes, Pat Spencer just driving into the lane and throwing up some nonsense and missing it badly. The defense was great, and I thought Keon Ellis had some great momentum shifting defensive plays where the Warriors had chances in transition to kind of stop the Kings' runs. And instead, Keon would create a turnover and hit it off Pat Spencer's leg or get a steal and push it the other way and then completely flip what was about to happen, what was going to be what seemingly easy Warriors points turning into Kings opportunities. And that defensive intensity stayed at the start of the fourth quarter. The very first play, Dennis Schroeder pressing full court, forcing an 8-second violation. We didn't see the first 3 seconds of that play. We come into the fourth quarter and all of a sudden the Warriors are inbounding and there's 11:57 on the clock. So obviously the Kings had like knocked it out of bounds or something. Whatever it was, it ended up in an 8-second violation and it was great. Jonathan Kuminga picked up his 5th foul pretty early in that fourth quarter. And the Kings, they got the lead, I think, up to double digits at one point. But then the Warriors started getting some momentum back. And it started with a couple of bad closeouts from Drew Eubanks on the perimeter. I felt like he had been so good through the first 3 quarters at defending the perimeter and defending the three-point shot, especially when he's out there with Precious Achuiwa and they're both kind of trying to defend the perimeter a little bit, both as big guys. But then in that fourth quarter, he had a couple of bad closeouts. One where he just didn't close out to the corner, and I think it was because him and Precious were on the same side, and I felt like there was just a little bit of a miscommunication on who was getting out to that three-point shooter. Then he had one where I think it was Brandon Podziemski. He just steps into him in the mid-range and fouls him. So then Maxime Raynaud comes back into this game and had a big block on Quentin Post. But the Warriors kept the momentum, and Malik Monk had a couple of moments where he gambled for steals and gave up three-point shots. So those were pretty big plays, pretty big momentum-changing plays where Malik Monk's going for a big gamble. And if he gets that ball, if he intercepts it on either of those possessions, he's going down for a dunk. And that's great, but he obviously paid for those gambles. I think the Warriors hit a 3 on both of the times he gambled. And all of a sudden, the Warriors are right back within 2 points, and the Kings' offense just slowed to a halt. It was so much dribbling from Dennis Schroeder, absolutely no ball movement, a couple of possessions of Malik Monk kind of just dribbling around, and those slow offensive possessions of Dennis Schroeder kind of just dribbling around and nobody moving and nothing really happening, then end up in the Warriors getting transition opportunities. They got an and one in transition, then hit a transition 3 for them to retake the lead. DeMar DeRozan got a technical foul after he didn't get a foul call that he wanted, and it felt like it was all kind of crumbling down because the Kings could not get any offense down the stretch, which has been a bit of a problem for the Kings early in this season. It's still very early, and there's been so many different Kings lineups, but the end of game offense has been a problem where it definitely stagnates for the Kings. And so it felt like, oh no, it's just going to be another one of those games where we crumble down the stretch. But that's not what happened at all. The Warriors retook the lead, and then the Kings retook the momentum right after that. And a lot of it was off of plays from Russell Westbrook, getting steals. He had multiple steals down the stretch, had multiple offensive rebounds where he just tipped the ball out. Dennis Schroeder, after it felt like he was just dribbling around doing absolutely nothing for a lot of the fourth quarter, and for a lot of the game, honestly, came up huge late, hitting a bailout three late in the shot clock. Then Russell Westbrook tipped an offensive rebound out to him. He hit another three. Russell Westbrook had a big putback tip. Eubanks had a block on Jonathan Kuminga. Dennis Schroeder pulled the chair out from under Jonathan Kuminga, and the Kings were able to get the stop on that possession. And the Kings were able to get a pretty big lead again. And then again, when the Kings get a big lead, the momentum shifts because Drew Eubanks fouls a three-point shooter again, and he fouled Moses Moody on a corner three-point attempt. So some really bad moments from Drew Eubanks in this fourth quarter. And the Kings offense then just turned into trying to kill clock a little bit to DeRozan. DeRozan had made some shots down the stretch of this game and was pretty good in the second half, but the Kings offense definitely became just killing clock and getting some bad shot attempts, which isn't the worst thing because they were up about, I think, 7 points with just a couple of minutes left. So they could absolutely win this game if they just got some stops. The problem is Kuminga started to get inside against like Dennis Schroeder. He was just getting mismatches, and that's tough to guard. And then Brandon Podziemski hit a deep three, and the Kings were getting no offense. And so it felt like the Kings might need to get a couple of scores maybe to really put this game away, but they were able to get the miss that they needed. Jonathan Kuminga missing that turnaround after DeMar fell down. Drew Eubanks grabs the rebound, and it becomes a free throw game. Dennis Schroeder knocks down the free throws. Russell Westbrook then forces a steal on the next possession, and the Kings get out of there with the W. And this was just such a fun game and such a great win because, of course, with the guys who are out, like you're just never going to have the cleanest game. And the Warriors, obviously the exact same thing because they have their guys out. And so it's just going to come down a lot to the energy that these guys are giving, and then some great individual performances from a guy like Russell Westbrook and the rookies out there. And it was one of those games where I wish I was in Golden One Center for it because it looked like an absolute blast, especially when Dennis Schroeder was hitting those threes late in the game and Russell Westbrook was getting offensive rebounds and getting steals and hyping up the crowd. Like that looked like an absolute great time. You also had Nique Clifford closing this game out. Like I said, he played 33 minutes and he closed this game, which was very fun. And let's talk more about Nique Clifford because the rookie had his best NBA game yet. Getting the start, scoring 12 points, grabbing 3 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal, going 3 for 6 from behind the three-point line. I thought his rebounding early on was noticeable, but also it felt like he wasn't super involved. There was only one possession in the first quarter where I remember him taking multiple dribbles and really looking to create any offense of his own. And so I just wanted to see him get on the ball and take some shots and create some offense. And as the game went on, he started to get more into the offense. And so while early on he wasn't really on the ball a lot, when he got the ball, he never really looked like he lacked confidence. He always looked confident on the ball. And he took that sidestep three. I was like, okay, that was a pretty confident shot of him. He also got into the mid-range and took a weird double clutch floater, but like he wasn't afraid to shoot that. He wasn't afraid to shoot some of these threes, and he looked quick with the ball. And so while I thought there was times where he could be more aggressive, and I want him to be more aggressive, and I want to see him on the ball more so we can see a little bit more of his playmaking, I think with it being still one of his first NBA games, he's going to be easing into things probably. And I thought this was a good step forward where you see him knocking down that three-point shot and he can kind of gain confidence from that. On the defensive end, he was tasked a lot with guarding Jonathan Kuminga. Like Russell Westbrook was the primary matchup to begin with, but Nique Clifford found himself on Kuminga quite a bit. And I thought he did a solid job. There were a couple of fouls in there, but he was bodying him up. And on defense in general, he was using his body pretty well. And I also thought he was making smart cuts. He was moving around off ball on offense well, getting himself open, making cuts at the right time. So I thought he looked really good, and I hope he can build on this. Now he's back from injury and he's getting this opportunity with Keegan out, but now even with more guys out. And I wasn't sure what to expect from him as a shooter. And I talked about that both in Summer League and in preseason. Like, I don't know who he is as a three-point shooter yet. This game was very encouraging when it came to his three-point shot because he looked so confident with it, both off the dribble and as a catch-and-shoot shooter. And it looked quick, it looked smooth, and he took 6 of them. And that's right where I want him to be in terms of attempts. The other rookie, Maxime Raynaud, I already talked about him a lot, especially on the defensive end where he's guarding on the perimeter. He was also contesting shots at the rim well. He had one moment where he wasn't able to grab a defensive rebound that I want to see him grab. And then he was also posted up and wasn't able to grab an entry pass. So like maybe the hands are a little bit of an issue still, but I love the way that he's fighting on the offensive glass and drawing fouls on that end. The way his first bucket was an offensive rebound and then put back. And when he was able to get to the free throw line, that free throw stroke looked very smooth. And so we didn't see any three-point attempts from him in this game, but I'm sure that will come in time. But I definitely think he earned himself more minutes going forward with this performance. The other young guy that we saw a few minutes from was Devin Carter. He had 5 minutes, but he continues to really not be able to get more than 5 minutes in a game. In this one, the only things he really did was he had a quick fire 3 that he missed. He got it off pretty quickly, but it doesn't really matter if you miss the shot. I want to see him have a quicker release. But like Domantas Sabonis, if you ain't going to make him, it doesn't really matter if it's quicker. And then he also had a drive where he was attacking a closeout from the three-point line, and he kind of just stopped in the middle of the lane, picked up his dribble, didn't create much, and then had to pass out, reset the offensive possession. And I think that's what we see a lot from him, where he's not able to generate much from his drives. And a lot of it comes down to people not respecting his three-point shot. So they don't have to close very hard on him. And he's also just a smaller player. So when he's attacking the rim, he's not too much of a threat. He hasn't had a lot of time to be able to show his game, but when he has, so far he hasn't really been an effective offensive player. And it especially hurts him when he's out there with Precious Achuiwa and Drew Eubanks, who both cannot shoot the 3. As much as maybe our commentary team wants us to believe that Drew Eubanks can hit a 3, as they've stated. He can hit that. I say, can he? Are we sure he can hit that? I could hit a 3 every now and then. I don't think Drew Eubanks can really hit that. And Precious Achuiwa definitely cannot either. So both of them together is already a bit of an awkward fit. Plus Devin Carter, the spacing is brutal. I thought Precious kind of, he was able to make an offensive impact. He minimized his deficiency of being a non-shooter with some good timing on his cuts. But the offense is going to be a bit of a struggle when you have that little shooting on the court. And then just looking at some of the other guys in this game, obviously Russell Westbrook, I talked about him a ton, 23 points, 16 rebounds, 10 assists, the triple-double. Absolutely incredible. He has maybe been the best player on the Kings this season. Zach LaVine was great and has been great before his injury. But Russell Westbrook has been far better than I thought he would be. I thought we would see some performances like this. I knew he still had this in him every once in a while, but to start this season, he's been doing this fairly consistently. And just the energy that he brings to this team, it is contagious. Dennis Schroeder had 18 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. His rebounding was definitely noticeable. The Kings, obviously, very small most of the time out there, especially in the starting lineup. Dennis Schroeder was doing a good job on the glass to help out Drew Eubanks and Russell Westbrook there. I don't think it was the best game from Dennis Schroeder, but he came up when it mattered most, hitting those 3s in the end. He had some really nice moments of getting to the rim and both creating for himself and for others. He had some quick drives and finishes throughout this game, but it was an inefficient scoring night from him, and it definitely felt like that. He had his struggles, but all that matters is really that he came up clutch on offense when it mattered. He also didn't have a great defensive game. Neither did Westbrook outside of his steals to close this game. Neither did Malik Monk. They were all pretty brutal at getting back cut, especially in that first half. a lot of ball watching from those guys. DeMar DeRozan ended this game with 25 points, 8 for 20 from the field, 9 for 9 from the free throw line. So the free throws, especially in that third quarter, were huge for him. He still hasn't had that kind of big offensive explosion that we know he can have, and I feel like it's coming at some point. But this was a game where we needed him to put up at least 25 points, and he got there in the end. It wasn't in the prettiest way, and he, had to do it by drawing fouls and getting the free throw line, but he got it done, and it was enough in the end. He made enough buckets in the fourth quarter to kind of keep the Kings ahead. So he got the job done. Drew Eubanks had 12 points, 6 rebounds, 2 blocks. There were some dumb plays from him, especially in the fourth quarter. 3 bad closeouts plus a dumb hook shot. But in the first half, I thought he was great. And then you had Malik Monk off the bench with 21 points, 2 for 5 from 3, 6 for 12 from the field. Big offensive game from him. Definitely wasn't perfect, but the Kings just needed his scoring with Zach LaVine and Domantas Sabonis out. And then the last guy is Keon Ellis. He didn't score in this game, but he played 17 minutes and had some, I thought, very important defensive moments. He only gets credit for 2 steals. It felt like he had more defensive moments than that, though, especially defending in transition. And just looking at Precious Achuiwa's stat line in his first game as a King, 9 minutes, 4 points, 3 rebounds, and a block. And the Kings really needed this win. Just when you're looking at the schedule, this was obviously a very winnable game with who the Warriors were running out there. Because coming up, you have OKC on Friday, then Minnesota, then Denver. Obviously, I don't know who's going to be healthy for the Kings against OKC, which makes it tough to really preview that game at all. OKC just lost their first game of the season today against Portland. They lost 121-119. What OKC has been able to do to start this season is pretty incredible with all the injuries that they've had. It's been Shea and then a mixture of guys, really. But we know they're obviously defensively an amazing team. And turnovers were a problem for the Kings in the first game this season that they played against OKC. The Kings were able to stay in that game and really give the Thunder a run for their money. But the turnovers absolutely killed the Kings. But I do hope that we see a lot more Nique Clifford and also continue to see Maxime Raynaud minutes, because I think that's what was really making this game enjoyable to watch, is watching those rookies play and have really good games. And then we'll also see if Russell Westbrook can continue this great run of form up. Right now, he's looking like an all-star. I mean, the Kings aren't good enough to really warrant an all-star spot, but imagine Russell Westbrook just continues to play like this. Maybe the Kings continue to have injuries, and Russell Westbrook just makes an all-star game at 36 years old. That would be so funny. But anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. I will be back on Friday to recap that game against OKC, and I will see you guys then. Peace.